Hi everyone, I'm George Jackson, executive producer and host of GovExec TV, and today's 5 questions are with Tony Holmes. He is practice lead for solutions architects for the public sector over at Pluralsight. Tony, welcome. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, George. Thanks for having me.
So we're talking FSIs today, Federal Systems Integrators. What's the talent war look like over at FSIs?
I think the talent war creates challenges on FSIs in a couple of different ways. I think by intensifying competition for skilled tech workers stands out, first of all. I think that particularly in areas like cloud and cyber and AI, where all of the government departments and the private sector all struggle to find great talent. They face challenges also with wage inflation and retention. Obviously, private companies are often looking to offer higher salaries, especially in AI right now. We're seeing this huge boom in salaries. And I think on top of that, finding talent with security clearances just compounds that and creates these further challenges on top. But I think that most FSIs that I work with as my clients are focusing a lot on upskilling and reskilling their current workforce. They're looking to use and partner with platforms like us at Pluralsight because we're able to offer them actionable insights and skill benchmarking across their entire organization. And I think it's important because when they have visibility into the benchmarks and the level of skills and access to hands-on labs where they can teach their folks to actually get hands-on safely with technology, it significantly shortens their time to skills and allows them to head off this talent crisis somewhat with their own people. And I think this approach helps them retain talent and supports compliance with their federal contracts, as well as enhancing their project delivery. So ultimately, taking this approach does help them benefit their mission outcomes.
Tony, you mentioned retention. How can these organizations better leverage existing talent or maybe compensate for that by going after some non-traditional applicants? Any advice there?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So I already mentioned that they can maximize existing talent by internally using continuous upskilling. And again, I think they can use regular tools like labs and sandboxes to allow their people to get actually hands-on and practice in a safe and secure environment, which is really important, especially in the world of artificial intelligence and generative AI as it is now. Everybody's concerned about how can they learn this technology without putting data out there. I think making sure that whatever they do, they keep on top of identifying skill gaps to keep employees current with the emerging technologies. And I think as they embrace emerging technologies, this also boosts retention and job satisfaction. But to the second part of your question, if you want to attract non-traditional talent for federal systems integrators market, I think there's a shift where people are starting to look at skills-based hiring. So prioritizing core competencies over, let's say, traditional credentials like degrees. And what this does is it expands the talent pool and brings candidates with diverse perspectives and much more broad life experiences. And these things are crucial for innovation and doing creative problem solving. And I also think that they can create tailored onboarding programs that focus more on essential skills and quick assimilation. And that's why we created our skill assessments the way that we are, because we noticed this gap in the marketplace. It allows the FSIs to quickly validate their skills for new missions, and it integrates a continuous growth or a more agile approach to actually the learning process within the upskilling area. And I think lastly, federal systems integrators can fill skill gaps efficiently and create more adaptable teams by absolutely embracing this concept of bringing in external concepts, external ideas, or life experiences that they wouldn't normally get going through, I guess, the traditional hiring methods.
FSIs, by and large, Tony, are pretty sizable organizations. They're very sophisticated organizations, and As a result, I think most of them are really focused on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives as part of their overall HR landscape, I'll call it. Is there an unintended benefit from, what you just outlined there to DEI initiatives? Does it result in more effective DEI initiatives at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I covered it quite a bit in the last answer, but I'm going to build off it a little bit. The strategy, when you embrace DEI approaches, it really does bring in. So first of all, it gets rid of a lot of hiring bias. Okay, because you're bringing in candidates from diverse backgrounds and they lack traditional credentials. So you're having to think about other ways to assess their capabilities and their abilities to execute on mission objectives. So I think that's one thing. But I also think, again, that these people bring strong competencies and traits that, are much more in terms of a non-traditional education in technology. So, for example, someone that's had to teach themselves cybersecurity is going to have more irreverent methods about understanding what's going on. They're going to have this persistence that they had to use in order to get through it, where they didn't get a chance to sit in a classroom and simply have someone to talk them through a curriculum. So I think that's a huge win for FSIs. And I think it fosters a more inclusive culture and a diverse talent pool, which is a huge win for discouraging what we call groupthink. You know, groupthink it makes us tend to solve problems in a very similar way each time, whereas this DEI approach to hiring drives more innovation and better aligns to the diverse missions that an FSI is likely to encounter.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation, Tony, that you're working to identify these skills gaps. Talk
Yeah.
about on the sort of flip side of that, when emerging technologies, I'll use generative artificial intelligence as an example, is out there, it's being used by the mainstream. Does the platform also allow for leaders to kind of effectively get their workforces using those emerging technologies to improve the business in a real or tangible way?
There are two schools of thought around artificial intelligence and generative AI. You have the school of thought where they say these are our technologists that deal with it, and these are the folks that we need to train on it. And then there are other, I think, more forward-looking organizations that basically say this is going to be a game changer for everybody. This is going to be as important a broad change to our workforce as perhaps Microsoft Office or the desktop suite and email have become. So with that in mind, we've got those. We take into account both of those approaches, but most importantly, we developed a comprehensive Gen AI learning product that was designed for a very broad audience because we recognize that not only the technologists, but the employees across all roles in government and in federal systems integrators are going to be able to leverage the benefits of generative AI productively. I think given its potential as a huge force multiplier where different technologies converge and meet, we're going to see a significant shift in efficiency across all job roles. I think to do this, we recognize that it's important to facilitate hands-on learning. I mentioned it earlier. Lots of organizations want their people to get hands-on with generative AI, but how do we do this without risking sensitive data leaking to the outside? So we created these generative AI sandboxes where team members can literally practice their prompt engineering across a variety of different LLM platforms at the same time. And it shuts them off from that risk of leaking that sensitive information. It gives them that safe environment that helps build that confidence and competence very quickly, preparing them for actual use in the workplace. And I think, lastly, we've got a huge commitment at our organization for a low latency learning approach. So basically, as relevant trends and technologies emerge, we're very focused on getting what people need to know to market very, very quickly, while still maintaining very high standards of quality that all of our learning products meet. So I think to kind of wrap that, when you take all of the tools that we've offered and combine it with the analytics and the role alignments and the skill assessments, our FSI clients have a really powerful toolkit to just align with their teams for the inevitable, what's going to be a huge AI-driven transformation. And this kind of whole organization approach equips their teams to, their technical teams to deal with this change, but also ensures that their main broader workforce is also much better aligned with their mission objectives and the needs of their clients.
Let me get back to a phrase that you used earlier in this conversation, Tony, and that's continuous upskilling and reskilling. For those organizations that want to be client ready for those FSIs, but they haven't really sort of moved very far down that path of continuous upskilling and reskilling, where would you encourage them to start?
There are several clients that I'm working with right now who are prioritizing this, and it's very common because I think lots of organizations are very, very good at paying lip service to this goal. You know, they talk a good game and we're going to do this and we're going to focus on continuous upskilling. But I think it's the ones that really roll up their sleeves and make it happen from the top down are the organizations that we're seeing reaping the rewards. So, you know, a culture of continuous learning means making skill development a top-down, ongoing strategic priority. It should be as much of a priority for your workforce if you're a technical organization as you know, many of your other top priorities. And this involves integrating the right tools to give you the insights on where your weaknesses are, where your gaps are, and understand where your strengths are and where you're ready to go as well. And then let that data drive on-demand curated content that actually focuses on those skill gaps. And again, you know, I'm going to come back to the labs and the hands-on stuff, because reading a book or watching a course is all well and good, but it's actually where the rubber meets the road, when you get hands-on with the technology, where the skills actually come into play. And I think combine that with our AI-driven learning paths that assess where you're at and then curate content automatically, basically gives you the ability to address that continuous learning, that culture of learning, but in a much more hands-off way than most people realize. And I think beyond that, it needs to be a culture that's promoted throughout. So encourage employees to set personal learning goals tied to evolving tech trends, and let the managers use their analytics to track the skill development and identify skill gaps. And you can have much more meaningful one-on-ones, understanding where these technologists want to take their career. Where do they want to go next? And you can actually get deep insight into that. And then you've got tech challenges, and internal hackathons can foster engagement and create a real-world problem-solving environment. And I think one of the last things to point out is to set an example by demonstrating that love for learning from the top down and recognize learners proudly. If you've got people in your organization that are demonstrating the values you want to instill in the broader organization, recognize it and encourage it and call it out. Because, you know, when you can align your training at an FSI with client requirements and ensure that your teams are not only technically proficient, but also mission focused. And I think regularly realigning roles, once you've got that culture of learning established, realign learning paths based on new technologies as they come, and encouraging teams to study more broadly across tech domains are going to keep the workforce adaptable, responsive, and again, ready to meet those mission demands.
Well, I've learned a lot from Tony Holmes, practice lead for solutions architects for the public sector at Pluralsight. Tony, thanks so much, sir.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
That was today's 5 questions for GovExec TV. I'm George Jackson. Have a great day.